May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm son of Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrael now entering the sanctuary. And I will present to you son of Yisrael, Deacon Bill. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. My title today is The Pope, the Vatican, and the World Are Deceived. Please turn to Yahshua 8, verse 44. You are of your teacher who is Satan the devil, and whatever your teacher desires you will do. She was a murderer from the beginning and remained not in the truth, because there is no truth in her. Therefore, when you speak your falsehoods, you speak her words, because she is a liar and the teacher of all lies. Notice it says that the evil woman that you worship is a liar. Mr. Pope, we all know that playing with little dolls on Christmas isn't teaching righteousness. And doing it on Christmas is teaching little children that keeping Christmas is fine. Well, we all know it's not. Mr. Pope, you are teaching little children sin. Celebrating Christ's mess, and yes, the God Christ and all other gods have brewed one big mess. You are luring people into accepting the mark of the beast, and it's not a little mark 666 on the foreheads. In Revelations, written by Yahshua, the man your system imprisoned on a tiny island, go to Revelations 13, verse 14, and deceives those who dwell on the earth by those acts of power which he had authority to do in the sight of the beast, saying to who dwell on the earth that they shall make a likeness of the beast which had wound by sword and did live, and had power to give life to the likeness of the beast, that the likeness of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the likeness of the beast should be killed. And he causes all, both great, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, that they should give to themselves a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, that no one may buy or sell unless he has the mark or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of the man, and his number is 666. You make no sense. You tell the people that they must strip themselves of worldliness. First, you don't know what worldliness is. Second, who are you to judge? You said, who are you to judge? I think you meant that that the world must strip themselves of righteousness. But your speechwriters made a mistake. The people are realizing that the Vatican is a liar. The man your system glorifies was a thief, a killer, and a robber. His name is Titus. That arch celebrates a crooked, evil, perverted man who stole the book of Yahweh and killed Yahweh's people. The Vatican system is ruthless. That means divining. Instead of divining, Yahweh tells the truth. Can means serpent. Your system bites like an adder. You don't care about life. It's obvious because you keep legalizing sins. If only Catholics were alive after nuclear war, they'd all be wiped out because of their diseases and fighting. The Vatican legalizes sodomy and says, we can't discriminate, we must love one another. Mr. Pope, that's not love, that's hate. Love is corruption. Yahweh's law teaches that you must rebuke your brother if he sins, not let him slide. Turn to Isaiah 13. Verse 2. Lift up a banner on the high mountains and raise your voice to them. Wave your hands so they may enter into the gates of the called out ones, the house of Yahweh. We are raising the banner, showing the deceived world their sins, showing the 10 commandments that are righteous and just. And these 10 commandments don't change. The authoritative books say that God is not the Creator's name. They said it should never have been used to replace his name. Vatican City and St. Peter's Basilica were built on an ancient pagan site, Vaticanus coli, kind of like E. coli. The Vatican legalizes everything evil and prohibits everything righteous. The Vatican climate change deal makes no sense. First they legalize sodomy, then say man's carbon footprint has overpowered. To this, they say they must depopulate. They legalize sins and then say, oh, carbon, oh, that's terrible. We better do something about it. Mr. Pope, if you really think carbon is ruining the earth, then the start would be to tell your cardinals to quit sending you on worthless trips in your Fiats and jets and stop speaking worldly garbage. That would eliminate your carbon. Your plan and the Vatican plan to depopulate was prophesied in Isaiah 14, verse 21. It says, prepare slaughter for her children because of the iniquity of their father, so that they may not rise, possess the earth, and fill the face of the world with cities. Yahweh prophesied the state of being of all the Vatican leaders. Turn to Deuteronomy 28. Verse 29, and you shall grow up at noonday, reduced to blind helplessness, just as a blind man gropes in the darkness. You will not be successful in any of your ways. You will only be oppressed and robbed continually, with no one to rescue you. The system that the Vatican system teaches causes death, war, fighting, and misery. Look at Aleppo, Syria, how the rebels are rebelling against the government. The house of Yahweh is bringing the book of Yahweh back. This time, Mr. Pope, your crooked system isn't stopping it. The deception about December 25th is being exposed. I know your crooked, dumb leaders at the Vatican, the Divining Serpent headquarters, are going into bunkers, but they'll have to come out because they will run out of food and water and supplies, and then they will be killed because of the radioactive fallout. The best thing you can do is to come to the house of Yahweh. And with that, if you'd all please stand.
If you'll all remain standing, it's my great honor and privilege to present to you the first speaker, a son of Yisrayl, Deacon Shalomo Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'm going to be talking about the blessings we will receive if we overcome. If you turn over to Revelations 2, it's on page 972. Verse 26, it says, and he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give power over the nations. All right, you see there that if we overcome, all right, we will be given power over these nations. Now that was That was part of the reason for Yahweh creating mankind. If you remember, please turn over to Genesis 1. Genesis 1:26. It says, Then Yahweh said, I will make man in my image, according to my likeness. They will have rulership over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. It says, So Yahweh created man in his own image. In the image of Yahweh he created the man. Then he created the woman from the man. Then Yahweh blessed him and said to him, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have rulership over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth. Alright, so part of Yahweh's plan is to give us these nations. If you turn over to Psalms 8, you also see Yahweh's plan. It's on page 437. Verse 1 says, How excellent is your great name in all the earth, Yahweh, our sovereign King. You have your glory firmly set in the starry frame, the heavens. From the mouths of babes and sucklings, strength by you is ordained. So you would still the enemy, the avenger would be crushed. When we consider your heavens, the works your fingers framed, the work of the moon and the stars which were by you ordained. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the Malachim, but you will crown him with glory and honor. You made man to be rulers over the works of your hands. You will put all things under his feet. Alright, so we will have this authority over all these things if we overcome. Alright, so we have a goal here that we have to strive to attain. Now, we are training for that position now. We have the sermons, the classes, the literature, all these things that pastor has given us so we can train for that position. And the 10 Commandments that you see in Exodus, be turning to Exodus, these 10 Commandments are given to us as our guide. Alright, these are what we have to follow in order to get this position. Exodus 20, verse 1 through 17, these are the 10 Commandments. Alright, you shall have no hinder gods at all. They are in opposition against me. You shall not make for yourself any carved image, an idol, in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, Yahweh your Father, I am a zealous heavenly Father. Alright, then you see in verse 7, you shall not take the name of Yahweh, your heavenly Father, and bring it to nothing. Verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Alright, now that's the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Moving on here in verse 12, honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false testimony against your neighbor. And the last one, you shall not covet, lust after anything. Alright, so the fourth commandment there, this one shows the appointments when we will meet with Yahweh weekly to get weekly instruction on managing the activities of the kingdoms. Alright, when we're given this position over these kingdoms, we will be meeting with Yahweh weekly. Alright, and that's what this fourth commandment shows. Every seventh day we meet with Yahweh. Alright, now we'll get weekly instructions on managing the kingdoms. Remember, this is only if we overcome. Alright, the kingdom will be given to us to train them in righteousness. Alright, that's why we'll be given these kingdoms, because we have to train them also. If you turn to Daniyl 7, it's on page 679. Daniyl 7 verse 26 says, But the judgment will sit, and they will take away his government to consume and to destroy it completely. Then the kingdoms and governments and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of Yahweh, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all governments will serve and obey him. All right, so you see, it's given to the saints of Yahweh. And what are the saints? Those who keep the whole law. All right, those who keep all of Yahweh's laws. So you can see there that the kingdoms will be given to us if we keep all his laws. And this authority will be given to us soon. If you turn to Daniel 12, it's just a few pages over. Daniel 12, verse 1 through 3, it says, "And at that time will Micaiah stand up, the great ruler who stands for the children of your people, and there will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation to that time. And at that time your people will be delivered, everyone who will be found written in the book of life. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise will shine as the brightness of the heavens, and those who turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever." All right, so it's those that turn many to righteousness. Well, how are we going to learn to turn people to righteousness? All right, well, our schooling starts here. All right, our training, we've been training for this, but it starts here. If you turn to Mattithyah 6. Mattithyah 6:33, it says, "But seek you first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Or you'll be given these things if you seek the kingdom of Yahweh. All right, now also you heard this in Deuteronomy. If you turn to Deuteronomy 12. Deuteronomy 12:5, it says, "But you are to seek the habitation of your father, the house of Yahweh, the place which Yahweh your father shall choose out of all your tribes to establish his name, and there you must go." All right, so you have to go to the house of Yahweh in order to train for this position that we're about to receive. All right, we have to seek it. That's what Yahshua said, and then you also see it here in Deuteronomy. Seek the house of Yahweh. Now the tests are now, if you turn to Exodus 20, you have these tests that will prove you to see if you're worthy for this position. Exodus 20, verse 20 says, "Moshe said to the people, 'Do not fear, for Yahweh has come to test and prove you, so that the reverence for Yahweh will be with you, so that you do not commit sin.'" All right, so Yahweh's proving us. The test may seem hard, but we're being proven and to see if we're fit for this kingdom. All right, we have to put into study every spare minute, hour of the day. We have to constantly study. All right, and Yahweh said this in 2 Tzephanyah 2. If you turn to 2 Tzephanyah 2, verse 15 and 19 says, "Study to show yourself approved to Yahweh, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, the law and the prophets." Verse 19, "Nevertheless, the foundation of Yahweh stands sure, having this seal. Yahweh knows those who are his, because everyone who reverences the name of Yahweh departs from iniquity." All right, so that's what the tests are for, is to prove us, to see if we're worthy for this. All right, and everyone who reverences the name of Yahweh departs from iniquity. So we won't have these sins in us anymore if we totally overcome and convert. If you turn to Revelations 26, all right, this is Revelations 2. Sorry about that. Revelations 2:26. This is the goal that we're striving to attain. It says, "And he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give power over the nations." All right, now that time is now. If you look at verse 7, it says, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the called out ones of the house of Yahweh. To him who overcomes, I will give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the garden of Yahweh. All right, so there you see the eating of the tree of life. Now, what does that mean? Remember, they cut themselves off from the tree of life. All right, they cut themselves off when they turned to the gods. When they turned to being evil like the gods. They followed the tree of the mixture. If you turn to Genesis 3, you can see where they were cut off. Genesis 3:22, it says, Then Yahweh said, Behold, the man has become like one who has begun to know righteousness and evil. And now he must not be allowed to put his hand and also take of the tree of life and eat and live forever. All right, so if you follow the tree of life, or if you eat from the tree of life, you will live forever. And that's what this is showing here. All right, but now in this generation through Yahshua, if you turn to Revelations 22, this shows how we will make it. Revelations 22, verse 12, says, And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me to give every man according as his work will be. I am the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Blessed are those who keep his laws, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. For outside are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and worshippers of gods, and everyone who professes to love, yet practices breaking the law. All right, so you can see who will be outside of the kingdom and won't partake of this tree of life. All right, but it says here, I, Yahshua, have sent my Malach to testify to you these things in the congregation of the house of Yahweh. I am the root and offspring of David and the bright and morning star. All right, so this is the same message we heard from the beginning. If you turn to 1 Diaconon 3, for my last scripture. 1 Diaconon 3, verse 7, it says, Little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. He who commits sin is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of Yahweh was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Verse 10 says, In this the children of Yahweh and the children of the devil are manifest. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of Yahweh, and he does not love his neighbor. For this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. So we heard this same message from the beginning, all right? It says here, Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder his brother? Because his works were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not marvel, my brothers, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love the brothers. He who does not love his neighbor abides in death. Whoever hates his neighbor is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. All right, so we're training for that position now. But remember, it's only for those who overcome and put to use what we've been learning. With that, if everyone will please stand. Let's turn over to the son of Yisrayl, Deacon Yahaqob. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'll be speaking on the second death. Now, we all know that all of us have sinned except for one man, and his name was Yahshua. And the wages of sin is death. If you turn to Romans 6, found on page 878, Romans 6, and look at verse 23. It says, For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of Yahweh is eternal life through Yahshua Messiah our Savior. Alright, you can't get away with sin, because dying, you will die. You must avoid sin. Now, Yahshua, he had no sin, so he was able to pay the price for us. If you look over to Romans 3, just a few pages over, Romans 3, look at verse 23. It says, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of Yahweh." Everyone has sinned. And also go to 1 Yachanan. 1 Yachanan 1, found on page 964, and verse 10. It says, "If we say that we have not sinned, we make him a liar, and his law is not in us." So we have all sinned. Now the door became open to us when Yahshua was resurrected and became high priest over the house of Yahweh. Now he sits, as it says in Hebrews, Yahshua sits, which means judges over those people of the house of Yahweh, the people who seek the house of Yahweh or seek the kingdom of Yahweh. Turn to Mattithyah 6, verse 33, found on page 733. Mattithyah 6:33. It says, "But seek you first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." And this was also said in Deuteronomy. Yahshua was quoting the words of the prophets. If you go to Deuteronomy 12, and look at verse 5, it says, found on page 157, it says, "But you are to seek the habitation of your father, the house of Yahweh, the place which Yahweh your father shall choose out of all your tribes to establish his name, and there you must go." Now remember what that word establish means. It means supported by the government that it abides. Alright, Yahweh established his name here at the house of Yahweh. Now let's go to 1 Yachanan, be turning to Yachanan. Yachanan 5, it says that Yahweh has committed all judgment to Yahshua. That's in Yachanan 5. Turn to Yachanan 5, found on page 819. And look at verse 22. It says, "For the Father does not judge any man, but has committed all judgment to the Son." And also look down to verse 27. It says, "And has given him authority to execute judgment." This is Yahshua. He has given Yahshua authority to execute judgment, also because he is the Son of Man. Now, his judgment is the same as Yahweh's judgment, because he is in unity with Yahweh. Let's look at Yahweh's judgment in Genesis. Turn to Genesis 4, found on page 3. This is Yahweh's judgment to Cain when Cain was angry because his people were not accepted. Genesis 4, and let's listen to Yahweh's judgment in verse 6. It says, "So Yahweh said to Cain, 'Why are you angry? Why are you downcast? If you do righteousness, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do righteousness, sin is crouching at your door. The desire to sin is with you, but you must overcome it.'" Or notice those words, overcome it. You must overcome sin. Now, let's read Yahshua's judgment. Turn to Revelation. Revelation 2, found on page 972. Revelation 2, and let's first look at verse 11. It says, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the called out ones of the house of Yahweh. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death." Alright, there you see Yahshua's judgment is the same as Yahweh's judgment. You have to overcome sin. Let's also look to verse 26. Yahshua says, "And he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, To him I will give power over the nations. And this is what we just learned about, the power over the nations. Now Yahshua also tells us to repent and convert. This is in Acts 3. Let's look over to Acts 3. Acts 3 found on page 842. Acts 3 in verse 19. It says, Repent therefore, and be converted, that your sins may be blotted out, that times of refreshing may come from the presence of Yahweh. Only then, after you repent and convert of sins, then your sins will be blotted out. After you repent and convert. Isn't that great? Your sins being blotted out? Praise Yahweh. Now, let's look at 1 Yochanan. Go to 1 Yochanan 3, found on page 965, 1 Yochanan 3. And let's look at verse 4. It says, Whoever commits sin transgresses also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. That's the breaking of Yahweh's law. Now let's look to verse 7. Little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous just as he is righteous. He who practices righteousness. You have to practice that righteousness. Let's look at verse 8. It says, He who commits sin is of the devil, for the devil had sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of Yahweh was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Also look at verse 10. It says, In this the children of Yahweh and the children of the devil are made manifest. The word manifest means to made known. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of Yahweh, and he does not love his neighbor. So those who practice Yahweh's righteousness will not be hurt by the second death. Let's look to Revelation 2. Let's go back to Revelation 2, found on page 972. Revelation 2, verse 11. It says, He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the called out ones of the house of Yahweh. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. Now remember but the unbelieving. That's in Revelation 21. Go to Revelation 21. Just a few pages over on page 985. Revelation 21, verse 7 and 8. It says, He who overcomes will inherit all things, and I will be his father, and he will be my son. But the fearful, notice this, but the fearful and unbelieving, and the abominable, and the murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and worshippers of gods, and all liars will have their part in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Alright, remember, if you practice Yahweh's righteousness, you will not be hurt by the second death. That's all the time I have. If y'all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the great Deacon Tsephanyah Rotalsky.
Shabbat Shalom. You may be seated. We got a message from heaven this week. On the 28th, as you might guess, one of Pastor's Latin number. We got this picture. And it was pointed out to me by a great deacon that this is the power of man right here. The power poles, right here is the power of Yahweh. And if you look between the lines, you can see the face of Yahweh, Yisrayl Hawkins, right above my finger, in between the lines there. See it? Right between the lines. There's the face of Yisrayl Hawkins. That was on the 28th. Now, if you take the same picture and you turn it like this, you get this image here. flock of sheep. And no, there's no numbers on the side of them. Then you take that same picture, looking at it again, you get this image here. That is a crusader. And if you look at it closely, you can see that he's not all beat up like he's coming from war, but he looks like he's going to war. He's got a smirk on his face, and he's actually, studying his facial features, he looks like he's in a dream state, like he's dreaming. Well, what does this mean? The only way we can find out is to go to the numbers, and this is another power of Yahweh. And this is all the numbers that's associated with this picture. The picture number means to overthrow. Hang on just a second. To overthrow, to overturn, to crook, make crooked, pervert, trouble, do wrong. To picture size as brother. That's an interesting number, a brother. Like the 12 tribes. A bottle from the gurgling sound. Now that's a verb. To pour out, to depopulate. That's an interesting term right there, to depopulate. House of bread. That is the house of Yahweh. The whole, meaning the whole house of Yahweh. A smiter, a traducer, to strike. Now that word traducer, that means to say untrue or malicious things about, to make a mockery of, to betray. And then the order number was to a measure for things dry, half an omer. And that is a measured amount, like 1/3. In the Greek, the same numbers. The number is too large for the Greek, so I had to use the next available number, which is 754. It means a principal tax gatherer. Chief among the publicans. A principal tax gatherer like the Vatican. Picture size is salt, and we know salt is a covenant. False accuser, the devil. Slanderer. Eating food, meat. And the input job number was stink. Output job number was an encounter or a concurrence in order to fall in line with meeting. And the last number, which order number, was Patmos. And remember, Patmos is the island that was owned by the Catholic Church where they had the Revelator in prison. Now, using these numbers, this is what this message means. A principal tax gatherer, the Vatican, has made a covenant with the devil, falling in line with her through her teachings, eating her food, her meat that she offers, whose sacrifices stink. The Vatican has plans to strike and overthrow the whole house of bread, the house of Yahweh, which includes the brothers that are not directly involved in the house of Yahweh at this time, but have a degree of righteousness that qualifies them as righteous, those that refuse the teachings of the Vatican. The Vatican plans are to crusade and to traduce, to say untrue and malicious things about, to make a mockery of, to overthrow, to pervert, trouble, to depopulate those that won't turn to her. Yahweh reveals this, his house. Yahweh reveals this to his house through the prophecy of Revelations 12:16. The earth helped the woman. The microbes are helping the house of Yahweh, revealing the plans of the Vatican to strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. Yisrayl Hawkins is the shepherd of this house. The house of Yahweh is a shepherd to those who won't bend the knee to the Vatican. This is a very timely message. from the third heaven. But we don't have to fear. Yahweh will not allow this house to be put in the grave. Yahweh's in full control. Put on your seatbelt, buckle up, which means to gird up your mind and get right with Yahweh, because they're in for a showdown. And if you'll please stand. I'd like to introduce the Great Kohan Yliyah, Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Of course, in this lovely, turbulent world we have going on today with treaties here and there, and of course, none of them bringing anything to of substantial meaning because they don't have the laws of Yahweh or these laws of peace based on them. Of course, this week, the Syrian ceasefire went into effect, and think about this. You had Russia, Syria, and Turkey. Now, Turkey being a NATO member, and remember, Turkey's allowing Russia to use their Air Force bases, and that's not doing very well with NATO right now. So NATO's having problems with Turkey, but the key person that was shut out of this ceasefire agreement was the United States. And the guaranteers of this peace agreement, or this ceasefire, is Russia and Turkey. Now, they have said this is a nationwide ceasefire in the country of Syria, except for terrorists. Now, President Erdogan, who is the president of Turkey, listen to what he says, because he says the United States are supplying terrorists. They pretty much refer to the United States as terrorists. So that's why they're not part of it. But then watch, when the State Department is questioning about it, they still say that they're leading these agreements. So it's very interesting how they're coming about. And then, of course, the United States putting sanctions on Russia, and they're specifically saying President Vladimir Putin for sabotaging, they're calling it cyber warfare also, the United States presidential election, saying that Russia persuade all of these Americans to vote for Donald Trump, which is still amazing in itself. You know, Russia has a great comment for fake news. They call it what Yahshua called it, lies. So I think that's a better term for it. But, of course, they're putting these sanctions. They expelled diplomats, but it's very interesting in what President Vladimir Putin did. He considered retaliation, then he said, we won't retaliate, we'll just wait. We'll let everything work itself out, and we'll see what we'll do. Now, of course, he's putting off time to wait for Donald Trump to come in office, President-elect Donald Trump to come in office here on the 20th of January to see where they can go from there. Well, Vladimir Putin's not the only one who's waiting for that to come in to office. Of course, John Kerry this week, Secretary John Kerry, gave a speech trying to explain, if you remember the news last week we showed with the United States at the UN Security Council, whenever it came up for this Israeli vote on the settlement agreement and what to or not to do, the United States abstained from voting. Israel wanted them to veto the bill altogether, but the United States, they abstained from it. Now, this was proposed by Egypt, was the leading country that proposed this. Well, in all of these things, it's very important to remember that this all brings us back to the original two-state solution, also known as the Oslo Accords, which was this peace agreement that was signed on September the 13th of 1993, confirmed by Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, and it was signed by Shimon Peres and Mahmoud Abbas. And before it gets into John Kerry's speech, there's just a little bit of history for some of the younger ones that may not be familiar with it. All of Yahweh's people should understand this covenant that was confirmed that Daniel spoke of, and Daniel chapter 9 spoke of, about how these things took place. But then listen to what Kerry says in his speech. It was about an hour and 15-minute speech, and we cut it down to about 12 minutes, where he refers to it's the only way to bring peace. It's the only way to get things done. The quartet is putting forth their effort in getting these things done. But listen carefully how there's really no other options given. And then at the very end, we go back. Remember, Mahmoud Abbas went and he met with Pope Francis earlier this year. And when he met with him, that's when Pope Francis called him an angel of peace. And of course, remember Mahmoud Abbas, when he left, he said, we will always be together because our mission is the same. So listen to what John Kerry's saying, Secretary John Kerry's saying, and remember this covenant that was confirmed, and remember what Pastor said, that there'll be stoppages in it, but then it will continue forward, here a little and there a little. If we could go ahead and play the news.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, we have a question of, is peace on the horizon for Syria? We know they've been an ongoing battle for quite some time now. More sanctions have been put on Russia. I'm sure they're probably tired of that. And strong words by Secretary of State John Kerry regarding the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. Well, we start off with a statement made by the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said the Syrian government and militants have signed a ceasefire deal and agreed to start peace talks. The three documents that have been signed, one is that the Syrian government and the armed opposition on the ceasefire and the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic. That's the first one that entails. The second one is on the measure that will help control the ceasefire regime. And of course, the last one is an announcement of readiness for the start of peace talks for the Syrian settlements.
Putin also said that Russia and Turkey will guarantee the truce, along with ordering the Russian military to scale down its presence in the Arab nation. The ceasefire is said to take effect at midnight, and the Syrian army will cease all military operations, but that doesn't include operations against Daesh and al-Qaeda affiliate al-Nusra Front terrorist organization.
Well, the Turkish President, Recep Erdogan, has been critical of the U.S. government's war against Daesh, saying that they're supporting the terrorist group, that is the United States. Erdogan said the coalition was saying that we'll fight against Daesh until the end. They were accusing us, speaking of Turkey, of supporting terrorist groups. On the contrary, now they've all disappeared. They've given support. They've been given support to Daesh. The United States has, Erdogan was saying, and another couple of groups, one being YPG and the PYD. And that's very clear. He said, we have confirmed evidence with pictures, photos, and videos.
Well, according to Erdogan, the coalition forces have not kept its promises and have taken different approaches to terrorist groups.
Well, one of the most important ceasefire deals in the last decade excluded the United States' inclusion. The Syrian ceasefire deal brokered between Turkey and Russia hadn't even invited the United States. Well, journalists asked the U.S. State Department if John Kerry, U.S. Secretary of State, if he took this as a snub. Well, State Department spokesperson John Kirby said that Mr. Kerry doesn't see the move as a snub, and we were not excluded, and we're still leading regarding the Syrian conflict and the things taking place in that region.
Well, some say that the U.S. has led every failed effort in Syria for a ceasefire, for a peace deal, and so forth. When Kirby was asked what the ISSG, the International Syrian Support Group, a coalition of 20 nations, what they've achieved, he said in response, I'm not able to report any tangible progress in those talks, but they do continue.
Interesting. Well, so far, every set of talks that the U.S. has been involved in, from the Geneva talks to ongoing talks between Kerry and his Russian counterpart Lavrov, have come to nothing in the end. And Jeff, it sounds like people are pretty much doubting if the U.S. has any ability to even bring a peaceful solution to the Syrian conflict. And time will tell, of course.
Well, Russia is also the focus of U.S. attention for other reasons. Larry McGee has been looking into the latest concerning the recent election scandal and several other events for us. Larry, what do you have?
Competition between the world's nuclear titans certainly hasn't mellowed any. Senator Lindsey Graham is proclaiming bipartisan support for sanctions against Russia related to allegations of U.S. election tampering. The U.S. official said we can expect that Congress will investigate the Russian involvement in our elections, and there will be bipartisan sanctions coming that will hit Russia hard, particularly President Putin as an individual. In response, Moscow is threatening to perpetuate the cycle in the event that the sanctions actually do come to pass. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova says Moscow is tired of lies about Russian hackers, and she labeled reports concerning possible new sanctions a provocation directed by the White House. The wayward member of the quartet is also tussling with the U.S. on other fronts as well. Russia is being credited, in conjunction with Turkey, with negotiating the latest ceasefire in Syria. The nationwide cessation of hostilities went into effect on Thursday and is the hope for many of a stable solution to the Syrian turmoil. The Russian Defense Ministry stated that the ceasefire is supported by 7 major opposition groups comprising up to 62,000 militiamen, and they commented further that any groups who refuse to lay down their arms will be considered terrorists. As a parting note on the election scandal, President Putin says that Moscow reserves the right for tit-for-tat measures, but they will not stoop to kitchen diplomacy. The Russian head says that they will plan their next steps to restore Russia-U.S. relations based on policy which the new administration of Donald Trump will pursue, and that Moscow will not create hurdles for American diplomats. They won't expel anyone. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Good time, Jeff. Back to you.
Wow. Well, it looks like Putin is really trying to keep a level head in regards to these things going back and forth.
Certainly not the first time he's dealt with sanctions being put upon them.
That's right. Well, the Declaration of Principles on Interim Self-Government Arrangements was signed on September 13th, 1993, and went into effect 1 month later. Now, if you don't recognize this declaration, you may know it by another name: the Oslo Accords. This was the 7-year peace agreement made between the leader of the PLO, or Palestinian Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat, and the leader of the Israeli government, Yitzhak Rabin. The following video gives a brief history and the hopes that came from the agreement. Take a look.
Two bitter adversaries meet on foreign soil to sign an agreement to help bring peace to their peoples. The world applauds them for putting old animosities aside, and they eventually win the Nobel Peace Prize. But what if their efforts do not succeed in ending a decades-old conflict? I'm Jim Lindsay, and this is History Lessons. Our topic today is the signing of the Oslo Accords on the South Lawn of the White House on September 13, 1993. The Oslo Accords originated in discussions that a Norwegian mediator brokered in January 1993. At the time, Israeli law banned contacts between Israelis and Palestinian Liberation Organization officials, so throughout the talks, the Norwegians frequently served as a go-between for the two sides. Few people expected the largely secret talks to succeed. Indeed, the Israeli government did not send an official representative to the talks until May. But thanks in part to the diligence of Norway's foreign minister, a deal was struck in August. The Oslo Accords fell far short of being a full-fledged peace treaty. Its goal was instead far more modest: to establish a process at which the two sides might one day reach a permanent settlement. Formally known as a Declaration of Principles on Interim Self-Government Arrangements, the Accord's main provisions were mutual recognition, the formation of an interim Palestinian government to administer the territory under its control, and an Israeli agreement to withdraw from parts of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The hope was that future negotiations would produce agreement on the thorny issues that had been put aside under Oslo, most notably the future of Jerusalem, the fate of the Palestinian refugees, the future of Israeli settlements, and the possibility of a Palestinian state. Israeli and Palestinian leaders nonetheless met at the White House on September 13th. Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres and Mahmoud Abbas of the PLO signed the accords at the same wooden table at which the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty had been signed 14 years earlier, in what the New York Times appropriately called a silent memorial to the assassinated Egyptian president Anwar el-Sadat. The most memorable image from the day came when Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin shook hands under the watchful eye of President Bill Clinton. Rabin addressed the issue of revenge in his remarks after the signing ceremony.
We have no desire for revenge. We harbor no hatred towards you. We, like you, are people. People who want to build a home, to plant a tree, to love, live side by side with you, in dignity, in empathy, as human beings, as free men. We are today giving peace a chance and saying to you, and saying again to you, enough. Let us pray that a day will come when we all will say farewell to the arms.
President Clinton's remarks that day signaled the high hopes embedded in the Oslo Accords.
Now the efforts of all who have labored before us bring us to this moment, a moment when we dare to pledge what for so long seemed difficult even to imagine, that the security of the Israeli people will be reconciled with the hopes of the Palestinian people, and there will be more security and more hope for all.
The Nobel Committee agreed. In 1994, it awarded Rabin, Arafat, and Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres the Peace Prize. Unfortunately, the goal of the Oslo Accords remains unfulfilled today.
Well, Katan, it's been 23 years since the Oslo Accords were signed and put into effect, but with many pauses and many problems, the goal of peace in the Middle East has been hindered. Now, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has been pushing for the main goal of the Oslo Accords over the course of the last 8 years. In a recent address, Secretary Kerry warns of the problems he foresees if the two-state solution, which is what the Oslo Accords speak about, is not reached soon.
Well, Kerry believes, quote, the two-state solution is the only way to achieve a just and lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians. It is the only way to ensure Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state, living in peace and security with its neighbors. It is the only way to ensure a future, freedom, and dignity for the Palestinian people, and, he added, it is an important way of advancing United States interests in the region. And, among other things, let's take a look at some of the other points Secretary Kerry made.
Today, I want to share candid thoughts about an issue which for decades has animated the foreign policy dialogue here and around the world, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Throughout his administration, President Obama has been deeply committed to Israel and its security, and that commitment has guided his pursuit of peace in the Middle East. This is an issue which all of you know I have worked on intensively during my time as Secretary of State for one simple reason: because the two-state solution is the only way to achieve a just and lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians. It is the only way to ensure Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state, living in peace and security with its neighbors. It is the only way to ensure a future of freedom and dignity for the Palestinian people, and it is an important way of advancing United States interests in the region. Now, I'd like to explain why that future is now in jeopardy, and provide some context for why we could not, in good conscience, stand in the way of a resolution at the United Nations that makes clear that both sides must act now to preserve the possibility of peace. I'm also here to share my conviction that there is still a way forward if the responsible parties are willing to act. Regrettably, some seem to believe that the U.S. friendship means the U.S. must accept any policy, regardless of our own interests, our own positions, our own words, our own principles, even after urging again and again that the policy must change. Friends need to tell each other the hard truths, and friendships require mutual respect. Israel's permanent representative to the United Nations, who does not support a two-state solution, said after the vote last week, quote, "It was to be expected that Israel's greatest ally would act in accordance with the values that we share and veto this resolution. This friend that has blocked countless efforts to delegitimize Israel cannot be true to our own values or even the stated democratic values of Israel. And we cannot properly defend and protect Israel if we allow a viable two-state solution to be destroyed before our own eyes." And that's the bottom line. The vote in the United Nations was about preserving the two-state solution. That's what we were standing up for. Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state, living side by side in peace and security with its neighbors. That's what we are trying to preserve for our sake and for theirs. In fact, this administration has been Israel's greatest friend and supporter, with an absolutely unwavering commitment to advancing Israel's security and protecting its legitimacy. In the midst of our own financial crisis and budget deficits, we repeatedly increased funding to support Israel. In fact, more than 1/2 of our entire global foreign military financing goes to Israel. And this fall, we concluded an historic $38 billion memorandum of understanding that exceeds any military assistance package the United States has provided to any country at any time. And that will invest in cutting-edge missile defense and sustain Israel's qualitative military edge for years to come. That's the measure of our support. So despite the obvious difficulties that I understood when I became Secretary of State, I knew that I had to do everything in my power to help end this conflict. And I was grateful to be working for President Obama, who was prepared to take risks for peace and was deeply committed to that effort. Like previous U.S. administrations, we have committed our influence and our resources to trying to resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict because, yes, it would serve American interests to stabilize a volatile region and fulfill America's commitment to the survival, security, and well-being of an Israel at peace with its Arab neighbors. Despite our best efforts over the years, the two-state solution is now in serious jeopardy. Today, there are a similar number of Jews and Palestinians living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. They have a choice. They can choose to live together in one state, or they can separate into two states. But here is a fundamental reality. If the choice is one state, Israel can either be Jewish or democratic. It cannot be both. And it won't ever really be at peace. Moreover, the Palestinians will never fully realize their vast potential in a homeland of their own with a one-state solution. Now, most on both sides understand this basic choice. And that is why it is important that polls of Israelis and Palestinians show that there is still strong support for the two-state solution, in theory. They just don't believe that it can happen. This critical decision about the future, one state or two states, is effectively being made on the ground every single day, despite the expressed opinion of the majority of the people. The status quo is leading towards one state and perpetual occupation. But most of the public either ignores it or has given up hope that anything can be done to change it. And with this passive resignation, the problem only gets worse, the risks get greater, and the choices are narrowed. Now, at the same time, we have to be clear about what is happening in the West Bank. The Israeli Prime Minister publicly supports a two-state solution. But his current coalition is the most right-wing in Israeli history, with an agenda driven by the most extreme elements. The result is that policies of this government, which the Prime Minister himself just described as more committed to settlements than any in Israel's history, are leading in the opposite direction. They're leading towards one state. In fact, Israel has increasingly consolidated control over much of the West Bank for its own purposes, effectively reversing the transitions to greater Palestinian civil authority that were called for by the Oslo Accords. Today, the 60% of the West Bank known as Area C, much of which was supposed to be transferred to Palestinian control long ago under the Oslo Accords, much of it is effectively off limits to Palestinian development. So the settler agenda is defining the future of Israel. And their stated purpose is clear. They believe in one state, Greater Israel. In fact, one prominent minister who heads a pro-settler party declared just after the U.S. election, and I quote, "The era of the two-state solution is over," end quote. And many other coalition ministers publicly reject a Palestinian state. And they are increasingly getting their way. So why are we so concerned? Why does this matter? Well, ask yourselves these questions. What happens if that agenda succeeds? Where does that lead? There are currently about 2.75 million Palestinians living under military occupation in the West Bank, most of them in areas A and B, 40% of the West Bank, where they have limited autonomy. They are restricted in their daily movements by a web of checkpoints and unable to travel into or out of the West Bank without a permit from the Israelis. So if there is only one state, you would have millions of Palestinians permanently living in segregated enclaves in the middle of the West Bank, with no real political rights, separate legal education and transportation systems, vast income disparities, under a permanent military occupation that deprives them of the most basic freedoms. Separate and unequal is what you would have. And nobody can explain how that works. How does that help Israel's security? How does that help the region? The answer is it doesn't, which is precisely why so many senior Israeli military and intelligence leaders, past and present, believe the two-state solution is the only real answer for Israel's long-term security. Now, one thing we do know, if Israel goes down the one-state path, it will never have true peace with the rest of the Arab world. And I can say that with certainty. And there is no doubt that they are prepared to have a fundamentally different relationship with Israel. That was stated in the Arab Peace Initiative years ago. And in all my recent conversations, Arab leaders have confirmed their readiness in the context of Israeli-Palestinian peace, not just to normalize relations, but to work openly on securing that peace with significant regional security cooperation. It's waiting. It's right there. And to take steps on the path to normalization to relations, including public meetings, providing there is a meaningful progress towards a two-state solution. My friends, that is a real opportunity that we should not allow to be missed. And that raises one final question. Is ours the generation that gives up on the dream of a Jewish democratic state of Israel living in peace and security with its neighbors? Because that is really what is at stake. Now, that is what informed our vote at the Security Council last week. The need to preserve the two-state solution. And both sides in this conflict must take responsibility to do that. In the end, we could not, in good conscience, protect the most extreme elements of the settler movement as it tries to destroy the two-state solution. So how do we get there? How do we get there to that peace? Since the parties have not yet been able to resume talks, The U.S. and the Middle East Quartet have repeatedly called on both sides to independently demonstrate a genuine commitment to the two-state solution, not just with words, but with real actions and policies to create the conditions for meaningful negotiations. Now, in the end, we all understand that a final status agreement can only be achieved through direct negotiations between the parties. We've said that again and again. We cannot impose the peace. President Obama and I know that the incoming administration has signaled that they may take a different path, and even suggested breaking from the long-standing U.S. policies on settlements, Jerusalem, and the possibility of a two-state solution. That is for them to decide. That's how we work.
Interesting speech by the Secretary of State. He doesn't have much time to get something going if it's going to get going.
That's right.
Well, the Vatican also has its position on the future of the Palestinians and the Israelis. On May 13, 2015, it recognized the territories inhabited by the Palestinians as their own state, in hopes that the treaty would help relations between Israelis and Palestinians. Now, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met with Pope Francis just a few days later at the Vatican, where they spoke in private for 20 minutes.
Topics included were the recent agreement between the Vatican and Palestine, as well as the peace process with Israel and the conflicts devastating the Middle East. The two leaders exchanged gifts. The Pope gave the Palestinian leader the Evangelii Gaudium, a 2013 apostolic exhortation written by Pope Francis on the Church's primary mission of evangelization in the modern world.
The Pope also gave Abbas an Angel of Peace medallion, telling him, "I thought of you. You are an angel of peace." Now, their meeting concluded as it began with affectionate hugs and kisses, and Mr. Abbas letting Pope Francis know this: we will always be together because our mission is the same.
Interesting.
Well, Secretary of State John Kerry is making every effort in the last few days of the Obama administration to push for the two-state solution. Could this be the solution to the Middle East crisis? Will peace be achieved if the Oslo Accords go back into effect? And how do the prophecies written thousands of years ago tie into these events taking place right now? Well, stay tuned, because up next is Yisrayl Hawkins answering these questions and many more. Now, to enhance your understanding on the prophecies written in the book of Daniel and Revelation, contact the House of Yahweh today and request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. The author of these publications, Yisrayl Hawkins, has been the leading expert on scriptural prophecies for over 40 years. You won't be disappointed.
When you contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can also go to any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com. And don't forget to visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. You can also email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And of course, don't forget for your resource for the best online study material to the Holy Scriptures, the Yisrael Says program is available. You can find that at www.yisraelsays.com.
Well, get ready to clap and cheer. Up next is Yisrayl Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Kohan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
At this time, if everyone would please stand, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the Great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Hey, you're looking great. You're looking great. Okay, let's join the rafters, okay? There you go. All right. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The peace of Yahweh. We're the start of this, you know. The start of true peace. Oh, this is great. The news is great. Everything I see in the news is great, including us in the news. They were 88,000. This article, Yisrayl Hawkins says he is revealing what the Bible really says about keeping the old Jewish laws. I hate to use some of these words like Jewish and like divine. I haven't found another way yet to address it, but both of them are evil. But that's the only thing the world understands, and to use them. So anyway, that was up to 88,000. I don't know what time it was when they called me this morning, and they called me a few minutes later, maybe an hour later, and it's now up to 91,900. So it's climbing pretty rapidly. So we are in the news, and praise Yahweh. The other one, Yisrayl Hawkins says real religious freedom is when religious truth is known and understood in this news article. When it's known and understood, that's freedom, freedom of religion. The other one running this same article that I read first is up to 87 million. 87 million. Hey, that's great. 87 million. Praise Yahweh. The news for the world is not quite so successful. If you notice the accusations, I was telling the elders a little bit ago that it seems like the politicians have to get angry before they tell the truth. They have to get real mad, almost go mad, go crazy before they come out and tell the truth. Like John Curry was talking about the thieving, hatred, murders, and so forth going on in Israel, and of course charges could be filed. This will be, from what I understand, is 5 days before Obama is supposed to leave office. Whether he leaves office or not depends on what occurs in that 5 days after this thing is signed to put into force. Now, there's some numbers given here. We haven't had time to study them yet, but that article, I believe, was 2423 or 2422. I forgot, but anyway, that number needs to be checked out. The Filipino president, he says he tells the truth about the Catholic Church at last. He has criticized the Catholic Church for attacking his human rights record, saying it has done nothing for drug addicts in the Philippines except collect money. Well, remember, this is what Revelation 17 says too, that there's just too much money in drugs, the pharmaceuticals, both legal and illegal. The spat between the institution and the president of the Philippines continues following a photo exhibition. The Vatican staged a commemorat the victims of Philippines. Violence, it says, happens by the president's hand. So they're accusing him of murder. In response, he blasts the church with insults at a Christmas party now. He picked a Christmas party to do that. You say, I'm a killer? You priest, you blame me for the deaths of thousands of drug addicts? Even those who died in hospitals, you still blame me? but you are the ones who killed Christ, he says. Let's see. Priest, but the president believes the church is doing an even poorer job, which includes ignoring the Philippines' poverty and drug addictions while continuing to collect cash in masses, at the masses, but in masses also. It'd be used in two ways. The church, a lot of it, of a whole bunch of it, at the masses. The church is not doing anything against illegal drugs. They never bothered to help. The church is not giving anything, even if they collect so much. Pope Leo, he says, it is about time to show you a history, he said. Pope Leo, as someone soured and even had sex with children. I'm glad someone else is bringing that history out besides us. Well, of course, let me break in right there and remind you of something that you've got to remember. If you don't remember this, you won't understand the scriptures that go with it. Get your thinking caps on now, and everyone listen. Yahdah, the tribe of Yahdah. Now, of course, it's scattered throughout the whole lands, all over the world right now. But the tribe of Yahdah still holds. The tribe of Yahdah, sitting on the 7 hills of Rome, it still holds the ruling scepter, meaning they're the leader of the kings of the earth, as Revelation 17 says. Now get that in your mind, because Genesis 49 shows in the last days. No, Yahdah didn't disappear, as history lies about. History wants you to think it disappeared, wants you to think there's no such thing as the 12 tribes running the 7 hills. But they're doing it. They were trained. Yahdah, the 12 tribes, were taken down in, that is, the patriarchs, were taken into Egypt. They took a religion of God worship with them. They mixed it with the gods of Egypt. This was a mixture that mixed with the gods of Egypt. The same thing you see in the tree that Yahweh showed you in the 2nd chapter of Genesis, the tree of righteousness and evil. They had a little bit of righteousness. You know, Abraham was their father, and Abel, Noah. And of course, this is where they came from. Ham went there first, it says history. They don't know that for sure, but that's what they say. Anyway, Ham was there. Hamites were there. Yahdah's evil is shown by the prophets, starting as early as Genesis 49. Also, before him was, of course, Cain, who was the seed. Cain, who was the seed that brought forth all of this, even Noah. So, and Cain was a God worshiper. So it was bred into his genes by, of course, those who accepted and came deceived and accepted the God worship. Yahdah will hold the ruling scepter until the nations come to obedience to Yahweh. That is an absolute fact shown in Scripture. They're going to hold that ruling position until the obedience of the nations becomes a reality, and then the nations are given by Yahweh to the house of Yahweh. That's what it shows in Genesis 49. And that's when we take rule. We're training for it now. As one of the deacons brought out just a few minutes ago, we're training for this position. And every day is a day of training. Every minute is. That's the reason you need to get these studies in. read what's put out by the house of Yahweh. It's the training periods. Go to the house and do what they say. Read it, study it, till it becomes a part of your being. Now, that is going to take place, Yahweh shows, and Yahshua shows, in this generation. This generation, which is about up, it began in 1934. If the nuclear, when they destroy all four, it's going to take place in this way. It's going to take place, including the nuclear bomb. When they destroy all four horns, all four horns, the quartet, the four kingdoms shown in Daniel, they're all the same thing. All the same thing. The kingdoms shown in Daniel, the quartet shown in Revelations. But this four, if you remember, was mentioned in Daniel, showing how they formed. These four religions. It wasn't like one died and another died and another took his place, or they killed him and he took his place. These were religions that was taking power. One became strong, another one became stronger, but they were just woven in by the government, which is much like the United States right now, and the parties in power that have the biggest amount of votes, or who can have the electoral votes, the biggest amount of electoral votes. Here you have a flaw in the system when you see Hillary Clinton won by millions of voters, but she lost by the electoral votes. So they have it where they can take one out and put another one in. Well, of course, even that's not going to work. You can see the buildup of the opposition taking place, and of course the feuds, the fighting going on. This will lead to other things, like the Pope visiting with John Curry to bring about this great takeover of the seat that Netanyahu is holding and doesn't want to give up. But this is what it's for. And we've seen this coming for months. And I said, this has got to take place. You know, this must take place, because all of this is going to end with that Oslo Accord. The 7-year peace plan, the part that is not fulfilled yet. You got to remember that. The best thing to do would get that book, the Nuclear Baby, where it's lined out in there, and the signing of it took place, and so forth. It's all got to end with this peace plan being put back into action, and then, as Thessalonians says, they're going to have true peace. So they're going to take that. This is their desire right now, and they're trying to push it through before the 5 days before Barack Obama leaves office. This right here could cause war in itself and add up to that. But I suspect it's going to be signed first. I know this. It's going to be signed first. It's going to be announced that they'll have peace, true peace. Then comes the sudden destruction. That's what Yahweh shows you. Otherwise, it will be held back. So the nuclear is going to take place of nuclear when they destroy all four horns of the golden altar, the altar of death, the altar of wars. That's what this is. Force, ruling by force. That's what Yahshua brought out and made it so clear to you. You cannot rule by force. You're going to see what is left alive is going to humbly submit themselves to the house of Yahweh. Now that's going to take place. That's the finishing of the with the finishing of the 7-year peace plan of Daniel 7:29, 7:27, I believe it is. Well, the things that we're seeing right now is We're seeing sickness, disease, wars, hatred, because iniquity abounds, Yahshua said. Iniquity, the doing away with the law. Daniel gave, in the same chapter, chapter 9 of Daniel, he said, our people have sinned, we've not followed your laws, speaking of Yahdah and the tribes, the heads of Israel, the heads of Yahaqob. Remember those identifying words. You heads of Yahaqob, you who hate the laws of Yahweh, who hate righteousness. Well, as a result of this, we have Indiana, the Indiana governor, Mike Pence, has declared a state of emergency in Indiana, battles the worst HIV outbreak in its history. Now, this is in modern medicine days, the best they got to offer, the very best they got to offer. This is the same thing that the Filipino president is saying. The Catholic Church is not doing anything to help in these matters. All the Catholic Church is doing is coming and getting our money and taking it back to the Vatican. Well, that's what it's all about. That's what their government does. The tribute of the nations is his. It won't be for much longer. A simple fight may follow you for the rest of your life. This is talking about bullying or giving in to a bully. Let him force you into a fight. Let him force you into Satan's way. Don't do it. Yahshua said, remember what Yahshua said if you want to be part of his kingdom. There's not going to be bullying. There's not going to be fighting. There'll be war no more. That's the house of Yahweh. And that's what and the volunteers for that. This is only volunteers. It's not going to be forced upon anyone. I missed one there. Painkillers. Painkillers are killing 18 women a day, every day. There's more men than women, but painkillers. The pharmacies, where do you think that money's going? Big money, big money. Everyone paying their share. They put a priest in every prison, a Catholic priest in every prison, and of course you have to pay for those things. The government does, but it's the taxes that's paying for them. Trump to begin presidency by repealing 70% of Obama's legacy. Obama asked him not to do that. He worked for 8 years, and now it's all going to be repealed if, of course, certain evil men get their certain evil ways, or the other evil men get their way. They're all evil. They're all following the Catholic Church, which is a mixture of righteousness and evil, and in this time period, there's very little righteousness to be found. Tremendous strength. India conducts successful ICBM, that's the International Ballistic Missile. This is what the nations are doing, spending billions and billions of dollars. In fact, the United States just signed a $40 billion trade bill on nuclear weapons. I think it was this week. Iran begins major aerial drills, warns off foreign and civilian pilots. You see, each nation is going the same route. Now, this is due to the leadership of Yahdah, who sits on the 7 hills and has never lost power from the time they were brought out of Egypt to the time they were led into Egypt. Yosef was the one that gave them the great name of being able to run successfully a country, which that power was coming from Yahweh. It wasn't coming from Yosef, but he was able to draw from Yahweh by dreams and by visions. So he won a name for the whole 12 tribes of Israel, and the whole nation of Egypt was completely turned over to them. If you'll just study this, you'll see what I mean. And it wasn't till much later that they started inflicting more taxes and more taxes because the Catholic Church wanted more money. Catholics, yes, Coptic Catholics. Russia questions U.S. grip on reality after sanctions. Sanctions from the U.S. against Russia. Iran army to hold major air defense maneuvers. China's aircraft carrier to drill in Western Pacific. U.S. nuclear proliferation. The $1 trillion doomsday nuclear scenario. You could get that article if you want it and read the full thing. Bloodiest Christmas weekend. This is speaking of Chicago, I do believe. 11 dead and more than 60. It's up more than that now. U.S. closed $40 billion worth of global arms agreement. I didn't know I had that article. In 2015, far outstripping competitors, it says. The money that's being made off of these, off of the war equipment, with no thought now. There's no love for the people they kill, no concern about it. It's the money that they bring in. Netanyahu likely to be investigated for bribery, fraud following secret probe discovery. Quite an interesting article that is showing the thoughts and apparently the investigations. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu conveyed a message to Iran on Wednesday warning the Islamic Republic leaders, don't threaten us. We're a tiger, we're not a rabbit, we'll fight back. This is their attitude. Now, these are the leaders. And there's nothing peaceful about this. And dividing a state into giving another nation a state side by side with another nation a state when you're both enemies, how can two walk together without being agreed? Well, there's no way, and this is what Yahweh said, and you cannot force that person. You can't force these Muslims to accept what the Catholic Church is putting out and the evil that it's bringing forth, the evil diseases, the wars, revolutions. Full text of UNSC resolution approved December 23, demanding Israel stop all settlement activity. You wonder why it took so long? The Catholic Church had to bring it about. The Vatican had to bring this whole thing about. And I told you in advance, I think I wrote it in the book, the nuclear baby, that this would be the way it was going to be. The Catholic Church was behind this whole thing. That is, the Vatican was behind the whole thing. They didn't make a showing. They never do. But Yahdah led this 7-year peace process into action, into signing. When Netanyahu took office, it was shut down. It had difficulty from the start because in the last portion of this, the Oslo Accord, it's all donated to and put under the control of the Vatican. And this is exactly what they're going to try to do right now in this administration. The global warming is also going to fit into this because they're going to be given the power of the nations, 96 nations behind them here. 96 countries signed that, and they'll have that power plus all their tools of war that each one owns. The UN Security Council passed a resolution, and here's the vote, 14-0, to stop these settlements and apparently try to put Netanyahu out of office. Tel Aviv rejects shameful and abuse anti-Israel UN resolution. Well, you see some great psychology coming forth here now from Netanyahu. He doesn't care about these people. He cares, he's trying to maintain his position that he has led since he's been in office and prevent the 7-year peace plan, which the Vatican said was signed. It was signed and delivered over to us. But you're not honoring your words, the Vatican said. I remember those words. I remember all these disputes coming down through the years when I was thinking each one was going to get this back into activity, because it's an active part that's got to be fulfilled, shown in Daniel, the 9th chapter. In fact, the very, very last part of the 9th chapter, after it shows you Yahdah all through that chapter, and the 12 tribes, clear down to the last days, in power, ruling the world, bringing about these decisions. Split into four, after they separated, they became the quartet that Daniel himself spoke of to begin with. Tel Aviv, Israel will not abide by the United Nations. Is that the closest they can get to unity? You look at that. United Nations, United States, bickering and fighting, the worst I've ever seen in all the 100 years that I've been here. Israel will not abide by the UN Security Council demands for Tel Aviv to halt its settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian lands. The office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement, Israel rejects this shameful anti-Israel resolutions. Well, you know, that's trying to hide the manure on one foot by sticking out the other foot in front of it. U.S. should, that's what I think of it, I'm an Okie. U.S. should help world impose sanctions. U.S. should help the world to impose sanctions. An American writer says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu only understands this language of sanctions, and the U.S. should help the world implement the recent UN Security Council declaration, but start imposing sanctions against Israel, like they're imposing sanctions against Russia and Iran right now. Trump calls for a stronger nuclear arsenal. So that's his plan. More war, stronger nuclear arsenal so he can force. This is force. This comes from Yahdah. It doesn't come from Yahweh or Yahshua. It comes from Yahdah, the force. It's from that time of Nimrod in chapter 10 of Genesis. Chapter 10 of Genesis. If you would go to Genesis 49, now keep that in mind, what I just brought forth there, and go over to Genesis 49. I've already got it because I've got a flap there. I'm waiting on you. 1, 2, oh, you got it already. 4, 7, 10. Okay, great. Look at the first verse. Believe it. This is what it's going to be in the last days. You see the words? The last two words in that verse. Last days. Last days. The last days is the nuclear. Go over to Mattithyah 24. I already got it. We got some pages flipping today, I can tell you. In the days of the nuclear, last days, you can't understand fully the messages of the prophets without the words of Yahshua. And the words of Yahshua actually started in Mattithyah 1 and go to Revelations 22. Those words are repeated by his apostles, of course, and repeated by the house of Yahweh almost 2,000 years ago. We were talking to Yochanan. I told Yahweh one time, I said, people are not going to believe this. But I decided to bring it anyway with Daniyl and to see, and the people were so excited about it. I said, Yahweh, you're right, and thanks for showing me. But in a vision, yes, we talked to Yochanan. I hope to show you that in this sermon. But listen, the last days now, if you notice in verse 3, that last line of verse 3, your coming and the end, the last days. And he says in verse 29, he says, this is a time when the sun is going to be darkened. Well, that gives you something to go by. The nuclear that can darken the sun, and then Revelations 18 said actually burn the earth in 1 hour. Nothing else could do that. Darken the sun gives you the time period that started with my birth. It started in 1934. I was born in 1934. The knowledge increase started in 1934. All those three things to indicate what time period Genesis 49 would be. Genesis 49, way back there, Yahweh was predicting what's going to take place in this generation. No person who has ever lived could ever boast of foretelling the future. But Yahweh had it written for us. Yes, had it written out for us. Genesis 49. In the last days, you're going to see this evil Yahdah like a lion, like facing a lion that's ready to kill you. Who dares arouse him? Well, the whole quartet is that way right now. And of course, it's all led by Yahdah. But no, verse 29, the sun darkened, and then verse 33 and 34, we see this is the generation. He said, Yahshua said that generation is not going to pass away. We're in that generation right now. The nuclear bomb that started in 1934. We're in the end of it, the very end of this generation. So now, verse 29, if you compare Revelations 17 and 18, you see the nuclear burning that is going to take place in 1 hour, and there's evidence to show, and I put it in several newspapers, but let's go over to Revelations 1 now. Revelations 1. I beat you. Revelations 1. There's so much shown in this right here, this very first verse, and this is where Yahweh shows us that we're telling Yochanan, we're teaching him what to write. Yochanan didn't write this thing in one day. You know, this book of Revelations is a long book, and he was writing by pencil. So Yahweh was teaching him, probably in vision, or that is mentioned, in dream that is mentioned. But in Revelations 1, we see the revelation of Yahshua Messiah. This is a revelation of Yahshua Messiah. So Yahshua Messiah in this time period as Hebrews 1 says, 1 through 3, says Yahshua is speaking to us, his house, in these last days, in this generation. The prophet spoke to us. Now Yahshua explains it to us. But I want to bring out something here that this first verse brings. It is so fantastic what our job is shown here in this verse. It's a revelation of Yahshua Messiah, which Yahweh gave to him. Yahweh gave this to Yahshua Messiah. What for? Notice that. Notice why he gave it to Yahshua Messiah. Hebrews says it. He is speaking to us through Yahshua Messiah in these last days to show his servants, to show Yahshua's servants in the last generation now, in the last days, these things must come to pass in a short time period in the last generation. So he gives this to Yahshua Messiah to show his servants, show Yahshua Messiah's servants, things which must shortly come to pass. Must shortly come to pass. We're in that time period, that generation. We're right at the very end of it. Yahweh has held back the wars up until this time that would darken the sun and burn the earth. But this generation is going to see this, he says. So show his servants, Yahshua's servants, the donkeys. Show the donkeys, his donkeys. Where is that shown? You remember? Remember the donkeys? Where's it shown first? My child Shaul knew. Genesis 49. Genesis 49 is shown this right here. To show to his servants the donkeys he's riding, the donkeys he's using, the house of Yahweh, that he's tied to right now, which must shortly come to pass in this time period, time of the nuclear bomb. And he sent and signified it through his Moloch, through his messenger to Yochanan. Get that now. Understand that. He signified this to be done by his messenger, giving it to Yochanan. Oh, I hope you understand that. I'll give you more. I'll give you more. This is another sea of glass vision. He gave it to Yahshua to show Yahweh gave it to Yahshua to show Yahweh's servants in this last time period. His servants, his house. His servants is his house. Yahshua said, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh. That's it right here. You are the kingdom of Yahweh. Seek first the kingdom of Yahweh. There will be priests, there will be counselors there, there will be judges there that will show you the way to go. Don't fight with them, he said. That wasn't what he told you to do. Go to his house. They are my servants. Do what they tell you to do. Do what they teach you to do. Don't go to the right or the left. Obey. Prove yourself to Yahweh that you can obey. It's not going to be forced on you. Nothing is forced in the house of Yahweh. It's all volunteer, it's all paid for, everything. We'll go to his house. That's Yahweh's servants. Revelations 22:16 says the house of Yahweh shows the house of Yahweh is teaching. And Yahshua gives that to his house in Revelations 22:13. Let's flip over there. We're right close to it here. I got it already. 22:16, Yahshua, I, Yahshua, have sent my Malachim to teach these things in the congregations of the house of Yahweh. See, we'll go back to 1 there now. And remember now, Romans 6:16, you belong to whom you serve, whether righteousness which leads to life. That's Romans 1:16. Just write it down. I'll quote it to you. You belong to whom you obey. His servants you are. Yahshua said, as was brought out in the sermon of receiving, he who receives me receives, he who receives the one I sent receives me, Yahshua said. Now that's in Romans 6:16, you belong to whom you obey, his servants you are, whether of righteousness which leads to life, or disobedience which leads to death. Same sermon, of course, that was brought in Genesis 2nd chapter. Then Yochanan 3, 4, 7, and 8, sin is the transgression of the law. First Yochanan 3, verses 4, says sin is the breaking of Yahweh's laws. 7 and 8 says if you practice sin, you belong to the one you obey, which is Satan. He said you actually belong to Satan. But his house, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness. Well, that's what Yahshua is showing us. Now, the prophecy, that prophecy, you can't beat these prophecies. They're 100% effective. But that word signify now, signify, it means signify it through his messenger, which Revelations 22:16 shows, to signify this through his messenger, That word signify can throw you off if you don't understand it. Signifies it through his messenger, as shown in Revelations 22:16, to his servant who is Yochanan. Yochanan was Yahshua's servant in prison, writing these things out, being taught to do so by his messenger. That messenger is shown in Genesis 49, the donkeys. So he gives this to Yahshua. Yahweh gives it to Yahshua, who gives it to his messenger to show to Yochanan what to write. If you study this closely, you'll get it. The Amplified Bible actually picked up on this, and I was so pleased because the commentators, they go into a frenzy like when a woman sees a mouse or something. They just freak out, and they cannot explain it. This is the revelation of Yahshua. This is an Amplified Bible. His unveiling of the divine, it says mysteries, is the righteous mysteries, the secret mysteries. Yahweh gave to him to disclose and make known to his bondservant, certain things which must shortly and speedily come to pass in their entirety, and he sent and communicated it through his messenger. Which we see the messenger over in Revelations 22:16, the house of Yahweh, and the trumpeter, of course. His messenger sends and communicates it through his messenger to, that's us, messenger, to his bondservant, Yahweh. Oh, that is beautiful, and you got to understand it. You got to understand it. Now, Revelations 1 and verse 10 says, I was in the Spirit on the day of Yahweh, and I heard behind me a great voice of a trumpeter. That trumpeter, of course, is shown in Revelations 22:16, but also in Mattithyah 24 and verse 31. Turn to that one. Mattithyah 24 and verse 31. So Yahweh heard behind him a trumpeter. A trumpeter. In Mattithyah 24:31, we see that trumpeter. And he will send his Malachim, messenger. That messenger, of course, is the house of Yahweh. That's what Micaiah shows you. Remember Micaiah 4? Listen to me now. Micaiah 4, verses 1 through 3. That Malachim right there. The Malachim, that's a group of messengers, which you are. And they will teach the world. That's what we're doing right now. We're reaching every place on the globe right now. The message is there. And more people every week are turning and reading, getting this message brought to them. And Yahshua, in this time period, the time of the nuclear bomb, he said, I will send my messengers, plural, with a great sound of a trumpet. That's me. And they will gather together his elect. Gather together his elect, and Jeremiah, the prophet, said it's going to be the greatest gathering ever take place. Well, we're the ones also that Yahweh is showing there that the message was given, and it was given to Yahshua, but Yahshua, through vision, that's the power he's got, taught this to Yahweh. As we taught it to Daniyl. This is the sea of glass, the sea where you actually see the prophecies that is taking place, the ships on the oceans, the wars that is forming, and the nations wanting to go to war and fight each other, kill each other. The messenger in 22 and Matthew 24:31 and Revelations 22:16. So Yahshua's message. Let's go back to Genesis now. Verse 10 shows Yahdah as being a ruler, and of course this is a big organization now and sits on the 7 hills of Rome, and they got their pope who is saying he's the ruler, but he's not. They send him letters, they send him here and there, and the Vatican tells him exactly what to say, and then the Vatican tells him where to go next. But verse 11, remember this now. Remember what you just read above this. We're teaching this. Thithering his donkey to the vine. Isn't it strange now? His donkey's colt to the choice branch. And no one would ever understand that now unless you know the prophecies, the other prophecies that go with it, and then Yahshua's words about his foundation being the 12 apostles and 12 disciples, and then the choice branch that Yahweh said, behold this choice branch, because he's going to establish this house. Thithering his donkey to the vine, I am the vine, Yahshua said. He is the vine, as he said. Thithering his donkey's colt, that's us, to the choice branch. He tied his donkeys to himself. That was the 12 disciples. And then he ties his donkeys of the colts of these donkeys, which we get being from their foundation that Yahshua had them lay for us, the writings from Mattithyah clear through to Revelations. So he thithers us, or ties us, the donkey's colts, you, to the branch, me. And of course, this is how Yahshua showed Yochanan, the house of Yahweh, and its work, and actually told him what to write long before we were born. Now notice the time period of Yahshua, the branch and the house of Yahweh, all together with Yahdah. You see that? Everything all together. Get that. The house of Yahweh, Yahshua, the vine and the branch, the house of Yahweh, all together with Yahdah. In, what did he say? Last days. Last days. That is the most fantastic thing. Genesis 49. Now look back to verse 8 with that in mind. Yahdah, your brothers will praise you. Yahdah, your brothers will praise you. And that's what they give their full strength to him right now. Verse 10, the scepter will not depart from Yahdah. Verse 8, Yahdah, your brothers will praise you. This is a service. This is a religion. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You can see religion here. This is a religion. The four religions, in fact, four religions that Daniel saw grow together into this four great kingdoms that stood up in his vision. In Zechariah 9 now let's go on and read on. You are, verse 9, you are a lion's cub, O Yahdah. You return from the prey. Notice a war. My son, like a lion, he crouches and lies down like the lion breed. Who dares arouse him? Now this is what you're seeing now. He puts this all together, he says, in the last days, if you will just read the whole thing, in Yahaqob. And of course, the whole system now, and all of those he scattered, and Daniel, if you remember, he said, all of these that has been scattered throughout the world, throughout the whole world, he says, in the time of Daniel, chapter 9. You need to really get that in your mind, that chapter 9. You could read it, really pay attention. Don't read it fast, but make sure you get every word. But notice now, verse 10, the scepter will not depart from Yahdah, nor the ruling staff, that's the ruling staff, not the volunteers, but the ruling staff, from between his feet until, and he gives you the time, that the Catholic Church is going to hold this power, until he comes to whom tribute belongs. Well, his coming now is not until the sun is darkened. Remember Mattithyah 24, verse 29 and 30, 33, 34. But notice what else? Obedience of the nations. Obedience of the nations. You certainly don't see any obedience from the nations today to Yahshua. You see it to Satan the devil. They all belong to Satan the devil. Obedience of the nations is his. In verse 1, the last days. This is Genesis 49. So Yahdah, who sits on 7 hills of Rome, is going to hold that power over the nations, the leader of the kings of the earth. That's Revelation 17:18. He's going to hold that power until the obedience of the nations. That's after the horns are chopped off. That's goring horns, the horns of death. But that ends with a nuclear burning. That's destroys. They destroy themselves. Well, thithering his donkeys to the vine. That's himself. Then the donkey's colts to the branch. That's us. He will wash the garments and so forth. Us remember that now and go over to Zechariah. Back to Zechariah 6, the branch. So remember the branch there. Choice branch. The choice branch. There's that word, that prophecy is given in many, many prophecies throughout the Holy Scripture. And to put them all together, then, you can understand the work of Yahweh in these last days that he's showing you there with his house. Zechariah 6, verse 11. Take the silver and gold and make crowns. This is the authority now. This is the authority that he's giving his house. And this is how it comes about. Take the silver and the gold. This is how the work that he showed in Genesis 49:10 and 11, the donkeys doing this work in the last days, and then Zechariah shows exactly how this comes out in this book of Zechariah. Well, we're in this time period now. We're in this time period of great nuclear bombs that can burn the earth in 1 hour. Everybody's scared. Everybody's building bomb shelters. Everybody. He says, take the silver and the gold and make crowns and this is authority, and set them on the head of Yahshua, son of Yahweh. That word Yazadek, even strong, shows that word means Yahweh. Yahshua, the son of Yahweh. If the King James Version hadn't have changed the names, they could understand that. But they put Joshua. Then they put it again over in Hebrews. But it's Yahshua. Yahshua, son of Yahweh. And crown him as high priest. Well, remember Hebrews now, saying that he's high priest over the house of Yahweh only. Speak to him and say, this is what Yahweh of hosts says, behold the man whose name is the branch. The branch you just saw in Genesis 49, verse 11. The branch, to which he ties a team of donkeys, which all together we become Yahweh's servant. Yahweh's servants who take this message out to all the world, and there will be war no more. No more. But we are the ones that's going to bring, this is the group right here, you are, that's going to bring this about. And we're chipping away at that block right now. Don't worry. Don't worry. Yahweh is not going to let this work fail. No way. Well, behold the man with the man whose name is the branch. You wouldn't know what this meant at all if you weren't familiar with these other scriptures. Genesis 49, Isaiah 11, Isaiah 22. It goes all through the Holy Scriptures. The two witnesses, the two witnesses is shown here by Zechariah. But you wouldn't know. And this man wrote in the years 520 to 587 BY, before Yahshua. He didn't even know Yahshua. But he wrote about Yahshua and Yahweh. And those with the King James Version would read this, and due to the work of Yahdah, who hated righteousness, the heads of Yahaqob all hated righteousness, they still do, sits on the throne right now, holding the scepter in the 7 hills, on 7 hills. They themselves removed the names Yahweh, Yahshua, changed them in the King James Version. That's the most popular. But you can still get the truth if you got a Strong's Concordance, if you get a book of Yahweh, which came on the market in 1987. For he, this man called the branch, spoken of in Genesis 49:11, he will branch out from his place, and he will build the house of the Lord, the King James Version says. But Yahweh shows in his book, the book of Yahweh, Strong's Concordance shows this, the house of Yahweh. The interlinear of the Hebrew English lexicon shows this, the house of Yahweh. The house of Yahweh, I will remain in the house of Yahweh forever, King David said. Well, that means it's going to be here forever. This establishment right here, in these last days, Yahshua says Satan will not prevail against this house. Build the house of Yahweh. Yes, he will build the house of Yahweh. He will bear glory and will sit and rule on his throne. He will be a priest upon his throne, and the council of peace will be between them both, the house of Yahweh and Yahshua the high priest. We're in Zechariah. Now this time period shows Daniel's prophecy. Daniel's prophecy. Look over to Daniel 8. Now all this ties together. Daniel spoke of the last days now. And his main job, Daniel was part of the people that was taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar. I started saying Netanyahu. Nebuchadnezzar. He was part of the people that was taken captive. And, of course, the history says, I said, well, who is Nebuchadnezzar? Well, the answer from the world is, he was probably a Chaldean. And I thought, how stupid could these people, they can't be that stupid. Nebuchadnezzar is a Hebrew name. And they all admit this. But why would they call him a Chaldean? Well, because the Chaldeans were always causing them trouble and taking over this and that. You know? Well, the stupid jerks, they in denying the scriptures, they also deny salvation or understanding. Now, these are the top of the crop as scholars, and they can't understand, and they search. Well, who is that person called the branch? They'll never find out unless they do what Yahshua said. Come to seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness. Then Yahweh will add this knowledge to you, this great understanding to you. He says, 8 and verse 16. Look at this, last part of verse 16. Man of Yahweh, make this man understand the vision. Man of Yahweh. Well, we'll see that later many times, and you'll start noticing it now. But this, again, is the house of Yahweh he's speaking of here, and the work, and of course, the vision that he saw, these 2 witnesses, and he talked to one. Keep that in mind, because he's talking to a man of Yahweh, not a man of God or a man of the Lord, but a man of Yahweh. firmly, a man of Yahweh. The house of Yahweh is the house of Yahweh. Get that. You've got to get that in your mind. Man of Yahweh, and notice what his command is. And he told Yahshua, behold this man now, this man of Yahweh, this branch, because that's where the work started. That's his last day's work, the last of the 7 works that Yahweh showed. He's showing it over and over and over. In verse 17, look at the last part, the time of the end. Man of Yahweh in the time of the end. Yahshua says, I sent my messenger, that's the man of Yahweh. Yahweh said, behold this man, he's going to build my house. The man of Yahweh. Verse 17. But get the word now, get the time period there. The last part of verse 17. Man of Yahweh, in the time of the end, show and make this man understand the vision. We were preaching this message long before we were ever born. We were bringing this message. So Yahweh had it all planned out that you would be here and be a part of his family. Yes. I knew you before you were ever born, he says. In Revelation 17 now, this prophecy of Daniyl here, Daniel 8 ties you in with Revelation 17. If you'll look to Daniel 8 and verse 22. Now because it broke off and 4 stood up. Here is where you get the quartet now that we see in Revelations 4, 5, and 6. And then you see the agency of this group sitting on the 7 hills in chapter 17. But read that again. Well, you'll have to go, let's go back to verse 18. Now, as I was speaking with me, as he was speaking with me, this man of Yahweh in the last days was speaking with me. See verse 17, the last part. Now, as in the last days, as this man of Yahweh was speaking with me, Daniyl died. Daniyl wrote, let me get the date for you, from 607 to 534. He didn't live to the end, brethren. He's dead. He's buried. He's waiting for us to resurrect him. That messenger of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh, that's part of their duty, to resurrect Daniyl. But before that, 2,500 years ago, the house of Yahweh was teaching Daniyl in vision, a sea of glass vision. And he says in verse 18, now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright on my feet. And he said, behold, I will make you know what will be the last end of the indignation, this hatred. Why are you angry, Cain? Cain, why are you angry? Why are you always so angry? Netanyahu, why are you so angry? Obama, why are you so angry? Mr. Filipino President, why are you so angry? I mean, it's all over the world. The end of this indignation, the chopping off of the horns, I'm going to make you understand it. I've spent a lot of time here today doing this today. The end of this indignation, for at the time appointed, the end will be. Then the realm you saw, which had 2 horns, are the kings of Medo-Persia. This is what that Christian preacher brought out and said, all of this has come to pass. He failed to see the words the end anywhere. You know, all of this come to pass. Daniyl was just writing history, he said. And the he-goat, the king of Greece, The great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now verse 22. Now, because it broke off, and there was four. Four stood in its place. Four. In the last days, in the time of the end, is where you see this. They come down from the creation of this, as Daniel showed in chapter 7, hating the laws, these four religions that became the leaders that finally wound up in Rome. Now, because it broke off, and whereas four stood in its place, four kingdoms will stand up out of the nations, of that nation, but not with its own power. Now, that is, Satan, Revelation 13 shows that Satan gives them their power. Now look at verse 23 and get the words there. Look at it. You see that? Verse 23, read it. Last days. In the last days of their kingdom, the last days, Yahshua showed you this in Mattithyah 24, also Revelations 17 and 18. The last days. The last days, it's going to come to a nuclear burning by these four right here. And the last days of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, that's today, that's what Yahshua said in Mattithyah 24, because iniquity will abound in the last days, all love is going to vanish. And that's what we're seeing here among these nations who sell guns to kill people with. Sin has reached its fullness. Transgressions all belong to Satan. Did you get that? Transgressions. That's the same word that the Yochanan used in Yochanan 3, verse 4, 7, and 8. Transgressions. He who transgresses the law belongs to Satan, the devil. You see what he's predicting here. He's predicting that this is going to increase in these last days to reach its peak, that all the world, all nations are going to belong to Satan. That's what he's showing. And that's exactly the pattern they're following. The Catholic Yahdah, who is sitting on 7 hills, is bringing every nation on earth, persuading them into war. Bringing them into war, and of course hoping, as Malachi Martin said, for a great depopulation where the Catholic Church hopes to be out on top and nothing but Catholics left in the world. Now that's their great goal of killing all of these people. In his interviews and in the book, The Keys of This Blood, we hold the keys. Malachi Martin knew this. He knew, and the Catholic Church, the Vatican knows this. They know that they hold that scepter, and they think they're going to destroy Yahshua and the heavens that went with him. This is a thought that Satan's putting in their mind. But notice the fullness. Transgressions, all nations belonging to Satan, the king of furious expression. Now, if you want to understand this fully, go study. Don't get it now. We're out of time. But study this week, and then next week we'll pick up where we left off here. But you can study 1 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, 1 Thessalonians 3 shows that when they say peace, peace, and this is what will take place. And I brought it out time after time. When they get that agreement through, then the 7-year agreement, Daniel shows, then comes the destruction. The 7-year agreement is shown in the last verses of chapter 9 of Daniel. Daniel chapter 9. Okay, reached its peak, full of transgressions have reached their peak. That's the same time period that Yahshua spoke of when he said, is be brought by religious impostors. False prophets, he said, will arise. That word means be aroused. Be aroused. And that's what the Vatican is doing now in Revelation. In Mattithyah 24. They will be aroused, these religions, religious impostors, which there's 4,199 of them in the world in this generation. And all of them are being aroused to war, to iniquity first, and that doing away with the law, forgetting about the law, let's go to war. It's just war. It's all just war. It's just war for Netanyahu to fight against the UN, rebel against the UN. It's just war for the UN to bring sanctions and so forth, which leads to other things, of course, retaliation. Vengeance and retaliation. So this furious king, in the last days, when transgressions has reached their peak, I'm in verse 23, Daniel 8:23, when transgressions have reached their peak, their fullness, this king, this religion of furious expression and understanding dark sentences, the divining serpent, in other words, will make it stand. Stand up, the word is actually make it stand to depopulate the earth, because that's what Daniel is showing here. You have to go clear over to chapter 12 to get to it, but that's what we're explaining to Daniel. We are explaining to Daniel back 500 BY. And his power will be mighty, but not through his own power, and he will destroy astonishingly. This is what's coming with the great nuclear burning. With the four in verse 22. Astonishingly, please read with me here, I'm in 24, verse 24. And he will succeed and practice and destroy the mighty, and that holy people should be all forms of holiness. That's what he's doing. That's what the Yahdah is doing. He hates righteousness, Yahweh said. The whole heads of Yahaqob, scattered throughout the earth, the whole 12 tribes who have multiplied all these years, and through his policy he will also cause craft, deceit, and fraud to succeed in his hand, and he will magnify himself in his heart, and by peace, by peace, by peace. And Daniel gives you the signs here to go by. He will destroy. It's not a he, it's not the Pope, it's the Vatican City that sits on 7 hills. Believe that. Leader of the kings, the religions of the earth. Leader of the religions of the earth. Revelation 17, verse 18. By peace, he will destroy many. He will also stand up against the prince of princes. Revelation 17:14 says they'll make war against the Lamb. This ties it right in with Daniel's prophecy here. What's taking place? The four are under this Vatican's control. And yes, they're being maneuvered. One is being maneuvered against the other one in order to bring war. He will stand up against the prince of princes, but he will be broken without hands. This thing shows that he's going to be actually destroy themselves. But notice in verse 26, seal up the vision, for it is for many, many days. A set time of the end. I don't know why even a Christian preacher couldn't read just a little further and get this. That this is for the end. It's for a time of great destruction, and by peace. They're going to be proclaiming peace, but it's the furthest thing from peace that they're putting together here. And of course, the nations being angry with one another, and all of them now have been stirred to a frenzy to where they're just about ready to use all they've got and to save their own nation, just like the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican. As Malachi Martin says, they hope to come out on top, but so does the United States, so does Russia. It's all coming, brethren, and this could break loose any day. I suspect it's going to break loose. I still suspect it's going to come in 2016. 2016, not 17. But it's up to Yahweh. Yahweh alone can hold this back or let it go, depending on his house. I think his house is ready. I think you're all ready. I think the choices have been made, and the ones that have been yielding to Yahweh, they've been selected and put together, and they're exactly the ones that Yahweh saw, and Yochanan saw, Daniel saw. There's many others besides that, but if you get those two, then you'll start seeing this in the others when you get to it. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you.